Welcome to the Immersive Railroading Beta Spotlight. In this video we're going to get everyone up to speed with all of the new features and all the changes that have happened in the past couple months since the last Spotlight. The first thing to note is there's quite a lot of new stock thanks to the modelers, which at this point are Legend5550 and Wrong Weekend. They both hang out in Discord if you want to congratulate them on the awesome work that they do. So we've got new stock, we've got the K4, we've got new passenger cars, and an updated British Railway passenger car. Unfortunately, you can't actually sit in the seats yet, but that should be coming in a couple months or so. We'll see what the timetable is. Big Boy looks good as ever, and you can see here's a couple new stock cars. And if you look closely, you can see that textures are now fully supported. Any 3D model which can be exported as object files and MTL files can be directly loaded into the mod as long as the textures are of a certain size and don't overload the graphics card. So you can see over here we've got another new diesel locomotive. This is from Wrong Weekend, and it's looking absolutely fantastic. He's got an interior in there, and it's just looking awesome. You can see the difference in quality between the first two models that I made and where this mod is going. I'm incredibly happy with the work that they've been doing, and I can't stress that enough. So, on to more of the actual functionality. Right now, you can see over here we've got water coming out of this tank that's being pumped into from this pump, coming out the bottom, going under and into this little blue square here. And if you look in the Immersive Railroading tab here, you can see we have a bunch of different augments for the track. So things like item loading, item unloading, fluid loading, the water trough, which I'll get to a little bit later. That's pretty neat. A detector and other unloaders. And you can see I'll be covering some more of that as we go on, but this is probably the most basic cases where you've got a steam locomotive sitting on the track, and you want to keep this full of water. If the locomotive does not stay full of water and it dips below a certain level, it's about, I think, 75% if I remember the code correctly, the locomotive will violently explode and destroy a huge chunk of your world. So you should probably watch out for that. You can see we've got a bunch of coal coke burning in here. That'll keep it running for quite some time. We've got the tender hooked up. The tender, if it has water in it, will automatically feed into the locomotive. And if you put coal back here, let me demonstrate that. That's coke bricks, coal coke. Put that in here. It's automatically pulled out of this, and I've got to fix some of the slots. Pull out of here and put directly in the engine. So you can keep these sitting here idling for as long as you've got fuel. Let's see. One thing I've added is the ability to walk between different pieces of stock. So right here, it popped me to the next one. So you can walk up and down the train as you're even as you're traveling. Each individual piece of stock has a certain number of players that can ride it. Most of the tenders, I think it defaults to one. The locomotives are usually 2 or 3, and the passenger cars, I think 20 or 30. Let's see. So previously, if you were going to do any sort of crafting in this mod, you would be going through and using what was formerly called the steam hammer. It's still technically called the steam hammer now, but it currently runs off of immersive flux power. So if we head over here, you can see we've got what looks like multi-block frames. Each of these are placed using what's currently the Immersive Railroading manual, which currently doesn't have anything in it. If you right-click on it, it says coming soon. That will be fixed at some point in the future. So if you shift right-click, it'll tell you which machine you're trying to place. If you're in survival mode, it'll pull the items out of your inventory if you have them. If you don't, it'll give you a nice message saying, hey, you're missing these particular materials. So let's do steam hammer, because that's a fairly small one. Let's come over here and just right-click, and there we go. And once you have this placed down, you can right-click anywhere on the multi-block, and it'll form. And usually they have some sort of GUI, or you can right-click on them with items to place them. Let's go through and form all of these now. So this is the boiler roller, this is the plate roller, this is the rail rolling machine, and this is the casting machine. And let me just form this over here. And just to get started, I'm going to take some of these blocks of steel and toss them directly into here. But that's not going to do anything yet, because each of these machines requires power. So let me grab a capacitor, stick it up here, one over here. You can see it melted down that steel, and you can now use it to cast in the large sand bed. Another thing to note is all these textures are work in progress. These will all be redone in a much better fashion in a couple weeks or so. You power, and give you power. Power goes over here. Okay, now that all of our machines have power, we can start actually going through and creating a locomotive. Let's see, which one did I want to create? This was the K4. So let's do, one thing to note is there's now multiple gauges that you can choose from. And I'm going to take a quick diversion because I didn't plan this well, and hop over here. And you can see, you can have model trains, you can have Brunel gauge, which is broad gauge, you can have narrow gauge, and you can have Minecraft gauge. So the model gauge is still kind of work in progress, so if you're playing on a survival server, I'd probably recommend staying away from that for the moment. But most of the other gauges work perfectly fine at this point. So let's see, heading back over here, we now have a bunch of molten metal, and we want to cast it. So we're on standard gauge. Let's set this to K4 Pacific, and you always want to start with the frame. Each one of these lists will have a frame item in there. These aren't ordered, and they probably should be, but just look at the tooltip, and you should be able to see that. So we've selected that, hit escape to get out of the menu, and you can see we've got particles, and there's sound playing, but my sound is currently turned off. And this is going to keep casting. If you look up here, you can see the level slowly dipping as it's performing the cast. Depending on the size of the locomotive and the size of the different components, the casting will either take more or less material and time. Let's see, right click, and now we've got the frame. So if we come over here and we right click, we place down the frame, and now at this point we can start attaching all the other components of the locomotive. So I have a bunch of them over here, so let's pop these into my inventory. And something to note is I'm still working on, some of these items are not rendering exactly correctly. I'm doing a lot of stuff on the fly that needs to be tuned. So as before, you right click on the locomotive or the stock car, whatever you're trying to attach components to, and you can see the components start showing up. But what's going to happen soon is it is now telling me I'm missing a main rod that requires two steps. First, it has to be cast, and then it has to be put in the steam hammer as a finishing step. There will be more steps coming soon, but this is what's currently implemented. So again, we go to the K4 Pacific, and that was, let's see, was that the side rod? That was main rod. Okay. K4 Pacific, main rod, and cast, and there we go. So if you look at the tooltip here, we cannot actually apply this to the locomotive at this point. It tells you that we have to come over to the steam hammer and put it in this UI. This is the same animation as before. Goes through, crafts the item, and there we go. Now the tooltip is removed. It is a fully finished piece, and we can stick it right on. And because I'm in creative, it copied it. So let's keep going there. Oh, now we're missing, let's see, we need a boiler segment. So first we need to go to the plate roller, and I need to grab some steel. Alright, we've got some steel. And there we go. We can right click it on here. Oh, and I had that set to small plate. My mistake. Let's grab some more steel and pull out these plates. So this plate roller, this UI, let me look at that. So this UI lets you choose which gauge and what type of plates. So there's small plates, medium plates, and large plates, and boiler plates. So let's choose the boiler plate from the K4 Pacific, and we can go again and put the block of steel here, and come over here, and there we go. We have one boiler plate, but this unfortunately can't be put directly on the locomotive. This is just a large hunk of steel that's been flattened. We can come over here and right-click it on this machine. And there's no animation yet, but eventually you'll see it move back and forth and slowly roll it into this final boiler shape. So now we can see we've got the finished item. We can come back over here, and we can place it on there. Oops, there we go. And okay, now we're missing, so the firebox requires a couple large plates. Let's grab some steel and set this to large plate. Let that finish. There we go. There we go, 4 large plates. So if we come back over here, there we go. It built the firebox. So we keep right-clicking, and it adds the rest of the components, and there we have it. One fully functional steam locomotive to be used in world. All right, so that's pretty. Okay, I'm actually forgetting one part of the crafting system. So this is how you craft a locomotive. Prior to this update, when you were to go through and try and place down tracks using the track blueprint tool, you needed to have treated wood planks in your inventory, and that was for the rail ties. But you also needed to have, it was the immersive engineering steel sticks. And that wasn't as realistic as I'd like, so I added a whole new crafting system around creating the different pieces of track. So let's just, because we aren't going to end up using this, let's choose one of these other gauges. Let's do narrow gauge. And we're going to set it to rail casting. And we exit the UI, and here we go. It's casting a rail. It's not necessarily a segment. It's a large chunk of metal that can be used to create a bunch of rail segments. So we can right-click it on this machine, and you can see it moves on its way through. And on the other end, we get our finished rail. And once it's over here, we can right-click, and we've got our rail segments. And you can see there's that gauge narrow down at the bottom. And that's something, as if you're playing in survival, creative, it usually lets you override the gauge. But if you're playing in survival, keep an eye on which gauge you're building for, otherwise you could be quite sad about that. All right, let's go through basic loading and unloading tutorial. So over here we have a car that doesn't have anything in it at the moment, and we have this fluid loader at Augment put on this track. And it's got, we've got fluid in our tank here. So this is currently set to false, so we'll turn this on. And now we can see, if you look closely at the bottom, it moves a little bit slowly because this is a large tank car. It's slowly pumping out of here. Let me grab a bucket. It's slowly pumping out of here and pumping into here. See? All right, so let's turn this off and head to the locomotive. And move over here. This is just a small demonstration track. And couple that together. And let's keep moving along down the line. And keep an eye on what's going on over here. Slow down a little bit. There we go. Back over here. And so this isn't currently pumping because I need to put a lever on here. There we go. And if you look, it'll be a little bit less obvious there, but if we come over here, we can see that this is starting to fill up with plant oil. And so there you have it. You can set up large-scale fluid transit across the map using Immersive Railroading. And the same applies for item transit. You would replace this piece with a hopper underneath the track, and the other area with a hopper leading into the item loader. Okay, so now that we've gone over the basics of the item loading and unloading system, let's go take a look at a different section of the map. This over here is set up in such a way that we can roll cars down the hill, this hill back here, and have them automatically get switched onto the correct freight train. So let's pop you off. That was just there for debugging and testing. Let's hop over here. And right now I have these speed retarders turned on, and these are both set to powered true. So what I've done is if I check the coupling here, these are decoupled and in shunting mode, which means that these, actually this should be, okay, so that's coupled correctly. This is set to decoupled in shunting mode. That's fine because the other one's in shunting mode. So we can come over here and make sure the engine is, yep, in shunting mode. So let's start pushing these cars onto the speed retarder and down the hill. Okay. Let's hop over here. And now that these are stuck down the hill, we can flip these levers off. And if we give them a little nudge, and there's a sheep on top because you can now climb this stuff. Well, they're both going down at this point, so you can see the gravity's acting on them as you'd expect. I can flip the lever, and it'll come to a stop if it has enough stopping power. There we go. Alright, so it's going to start speeding up again down here. And here we go. So this is a much simpler demonstration of what could be a much more complicated shunting system. Hey, got some nice snacks there. And there we go. Each coupled to the correct train right there. Pretty neat. Alright. I apologize for some of the stuttering. My computer is not quite as happy about recording and playing at the same time. Okay, so we've gone over most of the new parts of this mod. You've seen the augment system, you've seen the new stock, you've seen some of the, especially the gravity fix, which I just remembered was not in the previous spotlight, and a lot of the just a lot of the new stuff here. So let's see, there's 2 augments I'd like to cover, and then that's probably going to wrap up this video. My computer stops glitching as much. Okay, so at this point we have these detectors, and these are just the augment detectors. So what I've done, and I can demonstrate this on a smaller scale here, is let's grab a detector augment and plop it down there. And as that comes around again, we'll see that for every single car it's going to light up. Let's see, that is the E6 Atlantic. Oops, my mistake, I forgot to put down redstone in my haste. Let's do 1, 2, 3. And as it comes around again, if I did this correctly, you should see it light up. There we go. And you see it lit up for all the different cars. What we can do is we can right-click on the augment with a piece of stock, and you can see the message set augment to only act upon the E6 Atlantic. So when this comes around again, you'll see it will only light up for that first car. There we go. So this can be used in creating switching yards and all sorts of neat stuff. What I've done here is just something a little basic. If this one is currently set to, if it's the that's the A5 over here, then it'll set the switch and the train will follow that branch down, that branch line. And a similar setup for over here. And what I've done is I've ANDed these together, and I'll have this as a world download after, so people can play around and get a feel for the mod without starting at square zero, because there's a lot of complex and not documented, or I guess I'm documenting now, but not officially documented stuff in this mod. So we've got these 2 detectors, one for each of those 2 locomotives, and they're set to come here through a repeater and into the switch. Each of these switches operates off of redstone. And over here, I have this set so that if you've got a train coming this way, or even the other way, once the locomotive passes the initial 2 detectors, you need to keep the switch in the current state. So this will keep the switch in this direction as you have something either coming through this way, or cars following the engine coming this way. So I'm gonna, let's see, which train should I hop in? I'm gonna hop in neither of them at the moment because my computer is running too slow. Let's set this to short, which unfortunately is not the best visuals, but it's what we have to work with. Let's see. Let's hop in. Let's do the K4. Actually, no. Let's do the E6. Let's see. Okay. I've got a full head of steam. If I come back here, we can see this is empty right now. That's going to change very shortly. So let's get moving. And you can see the wheel slip there because I've got a relatively heavy load for this locomotive. There we go. And as we're coming across here, oh, come on, don't miss it. All right, so what you missed there, because my computer's been not happy with me, because I'm encoding the recording as I'm doing this. Let's back up and try that again. So there we go, get some wheel slip, and hop onto this, and you can see, hey, we've got a bunch of water in here. So as we're coming back this way, well, because my computer's not happy, we may cut this a little bit short. But I've managed to hop back this way and couple onto this over here, which is excellent. All right, let's just do one quick lap and then come back. And again, the mod's in beta. Pieces are changing and moving all the time. There we go. Full steam ahead. And pick up whatever water we've lost. So you can set up long-term passenger transport going across multiple sections of the map. There we go. I need to switch out the way I do recording for the next video. I apologize. So come across the bridge, come through here. And, sorry, I lost my train of thought. No pun intended. Anyways, long story short, there's a lot of new stuff in the mod. Come on, come hop on one of the servers on that are linked to in the Discord chat. And yeah, it's there's a bunch of people building a great community around this mod. Yeah. Let's see. I also need to get better at these videos. Let's see. Hopefully I don't crash here. I've got to stop myself here, otherwise it's just going to turn into a video of me sitting around and playing with the trains for a couple hours. So, hope you enjoyed it, and I'm pretty sure that was everything I was supposed to cover. See you in the 1.0 spotlight that's probably going to come in a couple months. I've got bug fixes and a bunch of new features to add. And then it'll be ready for public consumption without any of these caveats that I've just mentioned. Have a happy New Year.